All right, so this is the meeting of the monthly meeting of the San Francisco Bay chapter of STC, and our speaker tonight is Kit Brown Hoekstra, who is going to introduce herself.
All right, thanks, Richard. It's great to be here, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here tonight. Uh, I've heard from a lot of you about kind of your history and how you got into being self-employed if you are, or how you're trying to make that leap if you aren't. Not so many years ago, well, actually, it was a while ago as I was counting up. In 2003. I was sitting where some people are and wondering how I was going to find work and what kind of work I wanted to do. I loved science, loved writing magazine and journal articles. Well, actually, this was probably back in the 80s because this was before I started graduate school. I had a degree in biology. I wanted to be a vet, didn't get into vet school. That's another long story, but I love science and didn't get into vet school. So I was talking to one of my professors and he said, well, you're a pretty good writer. Why don't you go talk to my buddy in the journalism department? He's starting a grad program in tech com. And I'm like, great, what's tech com? Uh, so I ended up, shockingly, he let me in. And as I had never really written a whole lot other than term papers. Uh, and I wanted to be the American female James Harriet, or barring that, a science writer for magazines and journals. For some reason, I ended up in corporate documentation, writing about cardiac pacemakers. That was my second job out of graduate school. My first job was being a technical editor for a Superfund site remediation company, um, editing reclamation plans and things like that. In in 2000, oh, and then I ended up in the financial accounting, with working for Great Plains Software in Fargo, North Dakota, of all things. Um, and the former CEO of that is now the governor of North Dakota and is gone off the deep end, but that's another story. But then Microsoft bought the company, and I decided I didn't want to work for Microsoft, so I got a job working for a localization company in Boise, Idaho, called Lionbridge, which at the time was the largest localization company. And then when I got laid off in 2002, I decided I wanted to stay in Boise and I did not want to go back and work for when I found myself in tears after a job interview that they offered me the job, I was like, okay, I need to do something different. So I started doing consulting, and at Lionbridge was where I sort of learned. So when I was at the pacemaker company, I was in R&D, so I didn't really get the marketing or any of that, the business side of TechCom. When I was working at Great Plains, I learned a lot about the business side and the accounting and the financials. And then when I was working at Lionbridge, I learned a lot about how to be a consultant and how to have clients and things like that. So that's what I've been doing since 2003. Um, yeah, so uh, been doing this for a while. And right now, today we're going to talk about some of the things that you need to think about and do before starting your own business. This may not apply to some of you who've been doing this for a while, but it's always a good idea, even if you've been in business a while, to go back and revisit this because you may want to shift your business model, you may want to shift your business plan, you might be bored with what you're doing, and I could talk all day about this, but we only have an hour, so I'm going to give you the digest version. And this is going to be very interactive because I want you to get something practical out of this conversation. And some of you have been in business longer than I have, so you probably have some advice to give, and I would love to hear it from you. So this is a let's share our information, right? And feel free to ask questions. And if you think of something later, just email me. Two big mistakes that I see a lot of freelancers and consultants make in our industry are that they don't think of themselves as a business and therefore don't understand the business side of things, or they don't know themselves well enough to maximize their potential. So one of the things that is really key, that you have to have a very clear-eyed view of who you are as a person and what you need. Because if you need stability and structure, being an entrepreneur may not be the right choice for you, right? Because there's a lot of variability in income, a lot of variability in how much work you have, in workload and things like that. So what I would like to do right now is, if you have a pen, I know you do because you're writers, a pen and something to write with, something to write on. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and I want you to just jot down what your responses are. All right. And I'll give you a minute to reflect. And I'm going to give you a very short time because I don't want you to overthink it. Right. So the first question is, what matters most to you? What matters most to you in the context of um, starting your own business or having your own business? So I'm going to put a little reflection music on. And give you just a minute to think about that. What matters most to you? Okay. And then the second question is, why is it important for you to, if you are in the process of starting your own company or starting your own business, why is it important for you to do that now? Or if you've been doing it a while, what is one thing that you would like to change in 2025? So I'll give you a minute to think about that. Okay, great. Everybody got something that they've thought of? Awesome. So there's only a few of us on the line. Normally I would put people in a breakout room, but I would just like to hear from 2 or 3 voices in the room. What did you come up with? Whatever you choose to share, and remember that, whatever you share, you know, we hold, this is a, safe space, and we want to make sure that everyone is being supported in
And
their
it is
journey.
being recorded and it's going to go on YouTube. But
Okay.
just,
But this is a supportive community, and so whatever you choose to share.
I will say it was very easy for me to answer the first question. I didn't have to think at all. The one word answer is independence. That's really what I, I have been an employee of many times over the years, but I always prefer being at an arm's length from the company I'm working for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone else? That's great. Yeah, I think that's a lot of us have that as a key component. I see a lot of nodding in the room.
Yeah, I wanted to also share, I think the same thing. The first thing was just the message. of how important digital accessibility is, and to support that effort, to know that the work that I've done actually serves that purpose. So I guess it's purpose, that purpose, and similar to what Richard said, I put freedom. Like, I have the opportunity. I love that I can work remote almost anywhere. I can go see people, I can go see things and do things and still support myself and do purposeful work. So that's what I'm hoping to tie up with
And
this.
I love that you brought that up, Sharon, because purpose, if our work isn't meaningful, it's really hard to stay motivated, especially as
Mhm.
an entrepreneur. So, and as a business, as owning a small business, so that purpose and that freedom and that independence are like really key values, right? So
Mhm.
that's part of identifying who you are, is knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are, what your values, we're talking about values right now, what your passion is, in your case, accessibility. So having a really clear-eyed view of that really helps you focus your business, right? Um, Anyone else want to share?
Yeah, I'd say being able to have a straightforward and direct relationship with the client, you know,
Right.
being able to say what needs to be said directly and having them be able to do that with me as well. None of this dancing around, just needs to be said. Let's deal with it.
Yeah, and a lot of corporations, we're like 4 levels away from the a direct client contact. We maybe have access to tech support. So yeah, being able to talk to the client directly is super helpful because we eliminate a lot of the noise in the signal that way. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you,
I
Elena.
wrote respect, gratitude, trust.
Respect, gratitude, and trust. I like that. Those are all great values, and trust is super important. Being able to build trust with your clients, super important.
I find I
Uh,
can do remarkable things for remarkable lengths of time if I have all three.
yeah, the relationships are really, in the future of AI, um, relationships and human connection are going to become the power, the power position, right? Being good at connecting with people is going to be really key. So, thank you. Thank you. So one of the other things we need, that in terms of knowing your circumstances is also knowing your finances and your
Mhm.
lifestyle and your time challenges as well. So when I got laid off, and so I wasn't really planning on starting my own business. Don't be like me. Start your business with a little bit of a cushion, so that you can make choices about what jobs you take, and have a little time to plan and things like that. And in fact, I recommend doing it as a side hustle before you take the leap to do it full time, because then it gives you that cushion of seeing if you like it, right? Seeing if you want to keep doing it. Um, and lifestyle choices. So, some of the other things that we need to think about, and I'm kind of glossing over these. I have, like, in the 4-hour workshop, I have a whole exercise around all of this stuff, but I want to touch on it. And then what I would like your homework, if you choose to accept it, is to sit down after this call and just do a SWOT, SWOT analysis on what are your strengths and weaknesses, what are your passions, what are your values, what are your opportunities, um, what are the things that may threaten your ability to stay in business. Finances can be one of them, right? If you have to put food on the table, you may not have as much choice about what projects you take as if you have a cushion, right? What lifestyle you want, what
Can you
time
define
changes.
SWOT for us?
SWOT analysis is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it's a strategic planning exercise. There's another one that's called, that I actually like better, that's based on appreciative inquiry, and that's called SOAR. And that is strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. So what are you good at? The strengths are what are you personally good at, or what is your team personally good at? Opportunities are things external to you that you have a chance of optimizing, making better, taking advantage of. Aspirations are what do you want? You're here, where do you want to be? And what results do you want from those aspirations? What is the outcome that you're looking for? Because if you aren't clear on that, then it's very difficult to make progress or grow as a business, right? So that's so starting there, starting with knowing yourself, physician, know thyself, right? And know where you are versus where you want to be, so that you can build a roadmap to that, right? Because how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So, and if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So the skills, what skills, so part of your strengths are what skills do you have? Do you have some experience with management? Are you really good at tech stuff? Sharon is talking about accessibility, and obviously if I wrote that down, because if I need somebody who has an accessibility background, I'm going to be calling her, right? Are you good at accounting? I personally hate accounting. Even though I worked for a financial software company, management software company, I hate accounting. I outsource that. Sales. Are you good at sales? Because you need to be. You need to learn how to do sales when you are owning your own company. When you work for a company, you have a specific job with set expectations, and there are other people in the company with different jobs that in varying degrees support you to do yours, right? When you start your own company, you have to wear a lot of hats. So on any given day, I might be sending an invoice, networking with clients, prospecting for new clients, providing technical support to one of my clients, scheduling a business trip, leading a workshop, working with a subcontractor, doing sales and marketing, or somewhere in there actually doing billable work. So you don't have to be an expert at everything, but you do need some skills in each of these areas to be successful. And you need to know yourself well enough to know what you want to hire out. And you need to think about your time differently. So if you are charging $100 an hour for your work, and somebody can clean your house for $50 an hour, guess what you should be doing? Unless you really just love cleaning, you should be hiring that out, because every minute, as a business owner, every minute that you are not working is a minute that you are not able to bill, right? You're a client. So you need to think about your time differently, and your focus should be on making enough money so that you can outsource the things that you don't love and that are not part of your core business. So I understand a basic accounting. I can read a P&L sheet. I can do the planning, but I hate it. I hate it. So I hire a bookkeeper. I send them my stuff. They send it back to me. I review it. Good to go. So this is the part about, there's stuff that you're good at that you don't like. There's stuff that you're not good at that you don't like. There's stuff that you're not good at that you do like. And then there's your core passion, right? You want to be spending most of your time as a small business owner in that core passion area and outsource everything else. It'll save your sanity, and it also helps you focus on what's really, really important. So what I want you to do is take your pen and your notebook and write down just jot down a couple of notes. I'm going to give you a minute to answer the question, what are you best at? What is it that you love about your work? They may not be the same thing. You might be really good at accounting and hate it, right? Or you might be really good at tech writing and love it, you know? It doesn't necessarily mean what you're good at and what you're like to do are not necessarily the same thing. So 2 questions. What are you best at? And what do you love about your work? I'll give you a minute. What are you best at? And what gets you out of bed in the morning? What do you love? What's your passion? Okay. So I'm just going to let that germinate in your brain for a minute. Because we're going to talk about a couple of other things. What's your bright idea? So it's when you're starting a business, it's a really good idea to have a vision and a mission, right? So part of developing that is figuring out what is the business, what is the vision that you have for your business? And what is the business need for that business? So what business, as Andrea Ames likes to say, what is the business problem you're trying to solve? Why would somebody pay you for your blog? Why would somebody pay you for your skills? What is the problem that you solve for the company? So decide, what kind of business do you want to have? Are you wanting to be an independent, an influencer? Are you wanting to be an independent consultant / contractor? Do you want a staffing service like Andrew has? Do you want a team of consultants like Sarah O'Keefe? Do you want to be a service provider? Do you have a big idea for an app or a service or a product that you want to do? Or is there something else? What kind of business that you want to have? So when I was starting, I realized I didn't want to have to actually hire people. I use subcontractors when I need them, but I didn't want to have to feed a team of people. Feeding myself was hard enough. So I intentionally decided to stay as a individual consultant. And you, by the way, can change your mind later. A lot of people like Sharon Burton has gone in and out of working for other people and being an independent consultant for decades. So that's the beauty of this work, right? You can go in and out of corporate, or you can go in and out, you can shift what you're doing. I used to do independent contributor, but now I'm do more facilitation and consulting on big content system projects, right? So you can shift what you do. So take a moment and jot down, what is your business about? What makes it unique? What makes it unique? What is your business model? And if you're in transition, think about, what is it that you want it to be, right? Just because it's one way now doesn't mean it has to be that way. right? Okay. Everybody got something? So, I asked you what you thought your strengths and weaknesses were and what your business model, what you love, what you're passionate about. So I'd love to hear from a couple of you. What are you best at? You know, what are you best at? Just, and remember, brevity um, is a gift to the team. So, what are you best at? And what type of business do you think you want? Anyone?
Well, I'm best at understanding stuff and organizing it.
Is that also what you love?
That's a hard question. I love doing crossword puzzles. I mean, I love doing Sudoku. What do I love? I love writing computer programs, but nobody's going to pay me for that anymore.
Okay. Okay. But you're good at organizing information. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Because you
I'm
have
asking questions.
asking questions. I think that the best thing about most technical communicators is that they're insatiably curious. And a huge part of our job is asking impertinent questions, right? So, anyone else?
I wrote down research and then trusted access to rare resources.
Ooh,
People um, seem to value that most about what I supply. Maybe it's the candor, maybe it's the perspective, but when they stop dreaming and say, let's get real,
mm-hmm.
wonderful things happen. And I love being at the nexus of that.
Yeah, it's so much easier if people just can get to the point about something, right?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. It takes the guesswork out of everything. So yeah, thank you for sharing. So I'm hearing organization. These are all key core capabilities of technical communicators, right? Research, um, organizing information, asking questions, being clear and concise in our communication. Those are all key skills, right? So it's good that we like them. Anyone else? Okay. Um, the other thing that when you're starting if you're starting a company, or even if you've been in business for a while, the thing that you need to have in place is you need a Jedi Council, is what Pamela Slim calls it, her Jedi High Council. And that that person is, that team is a lawyer, an accountant, a banker, a financial planner, an insurance agent, and if you're going to have an office building, possibly a real estate agent, right? The lawyer, because you need to set up if you're serious about being in business, you need to set up an LLC or a corporation of some kind, and you need to have contracts that you need somebody to review your contracts, especially at first. So, I've been doing this a long time. I have contract templates that I had a lawyer do for me originally, and I have them review them every couple of years just to make sure that the law hasn't changed in my state. Um, but it's really important that if you're being serious, you have those processes in place and form an LLC, because it protects you if somebody decides to sue you in the unlikely event of a water landing. If somebody decides to sue you, that gives you financial protection from having your personal assets, taken away, right? Likewise, an accountant is super important for tax purposes because there are some things that if you are an LLC or an S corp, you can write off that you can't if you're just a sole proprietor with no legal entity, um, you know, taking care on your Schedule C on your 1040, right? If you're in the US. There are other forms if you're not in the US. The banker is really key, having a relationship, because this was a mistake I made, was I did not, when I first started out, set up a business line of credit, which is a significantly lower interest rate than a credit card. Um, you need a relationship with a banker to get this, to make those things happen. And you also need a business account. I don't care if you're only doing this as a side hustle, and you're only bringing in a couple $1,000s a month. You still need a, um, a business account because that will protect you also. It is, if you're commingling your funds, even if you have a LLC, if you're commingling your funds, you're at risk if you get sued. So it's really important to have and especially if you're married, to have a hard line between your business and your personal finances. Financial planner, because, saving for retirement in the US is really challenging when you're self-employed. And you need to, there are some instruments that are specifically designed for people who are self-employed, but you want to continue protecting yourself for the future and planning for the future, especially if things start really going gangbusters and you're bringing in a lot of money. The other thing that a financial planner and an accountant can help you with is figuring out that cash flow, right? Because I've had years where I've brought in $10,000 or $15,000 one month and nothing for 6 months. And so if you spend all that money, you're not able to pay your monthly bills, right? So, talking to these people as you're getting started or as you're shifting business models is really important. And then talking to them regularly every year. So I talk to my financial planner probably twice a year. I talk to my accountant every quarter. Um, the insurance agent for some industries like biotech or medical or life sciences, highly regulated industries, you may need, as a contractor or consultant, you may need errors and omissions insurance, right? And business insurance. So a lot of times, even if you're working from home, if you have God, and this is something that's on the top of everyone's minds because of the firestorms in California, in Southern California, if your house burns down and you work from home and you don't have business insurance, you may not have, and you may not get everything covered, right? That you lost in that fire. So, or flood or whatever. So talk to your insurance company and make sure that, and it also has tax implications if you're working from home. If you don't, depending on your designated area, like I have a dedicated office and I only use it for work. So, when I'm doing my taxes, I have the square footage of that office that I write off as part of my business expenses, right? And I pay rent. My company pays rent on the space. So, um, just like I would if I was renting a space. So those are things that if you're an LLC, you can write off. Same thing with a real estate agent. When you're looking for office space, if you get big enough, if you have multiple people, you may need to lease some space, or co-working spaces are useful now. So, Those are some things to think about. The other thing is that, you know, one of the things that happens with technical communication and professionals a lot is that one of the occupational hazards is that we tend to be overthinkers, right? At a certain point, if this is what you want to do, just do it. I mean, do it smartly, but just do it. Take the first step. I talked about doing a SOAR or a SWOT analysis. Write a business plan. If you're serious about your business, and especially if you need financing, and there's a lot of small business financing available if you know where to look. So the Small Business Administration, there's often grants and things like that. What are they called? Enterprise grants that certain locations that are trying to bring business into their area have, that kind of thing. If you need financing though, you need a business plan, right? What the exercise of doing a business plan does is it helps you define and refine what you're about, why you're in business, what your mission and values are, and what you're selling. And then you need to distill your vision into a 30-second elevator pitch. So, for example, my elevator pitch is I help global companies design and build content systems and localization strategies for so that they can better serve their clients wherever they live and work in whatever language they live and work in. So that includes content strategy, content operations, and content engineering, as well as facilitation and training. So that is my 30-second elevator pitch. I went into more detail than I normally would, but distill it down, because you want to be able to tell somebody when they ask you at a networking event, what do you do? What are your services? You know, how can I share what you do with other people, right? So writing that plan and thinking about your mission and values helps you with that. Then you also need to know capital requirements. Capital is like equipment, anything you need to buy in order to go into business for yourself. So if you are currently working for someone else and doing a side hustle, you need your own computer. You can't use your work computer, or you shouldn't use your work computer for your side hustle. Okay, you need to keep those separate, because some companies have a rule that if you're using their equipment, and they're assuming you're on company time and they own your IP, your intellectual property. So you need to keep that separate. You need to decide what kind of entity you need, because LLCs are great in the US, in many states, but not all. In some states, you have to be an S corp or an Inc. or something else. If you're a nonprofit, there may be another type of entity that you want to do. And then the other thing, and this might be the hardest one, is come up with a name. I don't recommend using your own name, because then if you grow and you ever decide to sell the business, it makes it really hard, because you are the business. You won't be able to sell it, right? Not that you necessarily ever want to. I mean, a lot of people just shut it, like individual consultants just shut it down when they're done, right? When they decide to retire. But give yourself that option by setting up an entity that it has a name. So, and you know how I came up, I had a couple of names. My original one was Double Helix Communications, because I wanted to focus on science and life sciences communication. There were 8,000 names, businesses that were called that. So when I Googled it 21 years ago, there's probably more than that now. So Genesis was communication. And at the time that I started my company, I think it was about the time that the Star Trek movie about the Genesis project came out. So I just made an amalgamation of the term. So you think about what kind of name do you want for your business?
You know, there's a program, a radio program called Tech Nation that I think it's nationally syndicated. And one of the things that Moira Gunn, the principal of that, did was go to a company called Name Lab to come up with that name, Tech Nation.
Oh yeah, I have heard of NameLab. That's a great suggestion, Richard. Yeah, NameLab. Um, so one thing to be careful of though with that is that the AI generated names are sometimes already taken, right? So you do need to Google and make sure that there aren't, you need to check for trademarking and copywriting before you set up the entity. And that's the other reason for using a lawyer to set up your corporate entity is that they do a trademark and copyright search for that name in your state at least. And you can tell them to do a nationwide search. The other thing you need to be careful of is names that would be insulting in another culture, right? Or marketing slogans that would be insulting in another culture or just silly in another culture. So there was one that I think it was Pepsi had a GE, oh no, it was GE. GE had a light bulb commercial that said, "We bring good things to life." And that translated into Chinese as "We bring your ancestors back from the dead." So you want to really think about, multicultural because if it's on the web, it's global,
There was
right?
there was a story about Chevy Nova, which
Yeah.
Latin America is Nova, doesn't go.
Well, that one is actually not that one's a urban legend
Yeah.
because the word nova, which is exploding star, right, means the same thing in Spanish as it does in English. It's only when it's two separate words that that it means something different. So
It was such a good story.
it is a great
That's a good
story.
story.
It
Yeah.
is a great story. It illustrates the point still. Yeah. Um, okay, so so just make sure you're planning and taking the time and really focus on it and concentrate on again being clear-eyed in what you're doing, right? Because inevitably, because the more you plan and are ready for, and the other thing that needs to be in your plan is risk mitigation because, oh, you're going to have problems, especially in the first couple of years. I mean, most businesses fail in the first 3 years if they're going to. So, you need to think about your financial things could be cash flow, right? Could be your client just decided not to pay you. I had a client that was a multi-billion-dollar company, and it took them 4 months and me threatening to sue them before they actually paid me. I don't continue working with clients like that, right? But $30,000 to them was a drop in the bucket. $30,000 to me was my whole quarter, right?
Yeah.
So really think about and make sure that if you have subcontractors that you're paying them even if you haven't gotten paid. So you need to have a credit line,
Yeah.
a credit limit big enough to cover that gap because sometimes you have a 30-day payment schedule, but your client has a 45-day payment schedule. And if they're bigger than you, they're just going to pay you on that 45 to 60-day schedule, right? And they'll just eat the penalties because they don't care.
My slowest pay client was Oracle.
Yeah.
And
Well, Okay, so we're going to be on YouTube, so you might want to be careful about naming names. But yes, and I will say that I have only had that problem twice because I pre-qualify all of my clients. And I learned that from that lesson, I learned that I take a deposit up front of at least 10% of the 10% or $2,500, whichever is more, of the contract. So before I do any work, right? And that's also where you want to make sure that you have contracts signed with your clients and that I always offer them my general services agreement. Sometimes the bigger companies will have their own that they demand that I use, but and in that case, I always talk to my lawyer before I sign it, right? Because if they're using theirs, it's probably written to benefit them. And everything, when you are, well, even if you're looking for full-time work, everything is negotiable, right? And if they're jerks in the negotiation stage, you probably don't want them as clients. I'll just say, most of the time, my clients are like, yeah, that's no problem. I have a lot of intellectual property that I use as part of my training, particularly that I want to keep the copyright for. So I put that in my contract, right? So making sure that you have that cash flow, that you have the contracts, so other problems that can come up, scope creep, right? We've never had that as technical writers. Um, you have to have something documented as to how you're going to handle that scope creep when it happens, because it's not an if, it's a when, right? Oh, can you just do this one little tweak here after the last review? Um, that can delay the whole project, right? If a subcontractor does a crappy job, you need to have recourse, right? You need to have contracts with your subcontractors. If your client requires an NDA, you need to have your subcontractors covered by that same NDA. Um, you know, Somebody sues you. It's unlikely to happen in a tech com situation, but it has happened, especially if there's a problem with the documentation and somebody dies. Um, so one of the ways I protect myself that way is I say that the technical accuracy is on the company, is on the client. That I will do my best to give technically accurate, high quality content, but ultimately the technical accuracy is on the client because they are the ones who are the subject matter experts, right?
Right, right.
And especially with
that's
regulated industries, that's really critical. What were you saying, Richard? I'm sorry.
That's important. I always make sure, in times when I've had contracts that was one of the provisions.
Yeah. And the other thing that doesn't get talked about a lot with being self-employed is burnout. Because, especially when you're first starting your company, you're working a lot of hours to get the infrastructure set up, to get your processes in place and the kinks worked out, and learning how to manage all the different hats that you have to wear. Um, and you end up working a lot of hours, and sometimes you can get really burned out, but you have a project due and you've got to suck it up and do it. You can't just, there's nobody else to hand it off to, right? You can't call in sick just because you're tired, when you're self-employed. So that's something to think about. How do you handle those situations? The more you can think about risk mitigation, the better off you're going to be. And John actually wrote a whole book on risk mitigation not too long ago. He was talking about disaster planning, but disaster planning is also something because, I'm sure the people who worked from home in Southern California who no longer have homes were not planning on losing their business, right? Not planning on, they maybe had seconds to get out. So did they remember to take their laptop or their backup drives or their the things they were working on? I don't know, you know? So what is your risk mitigation? I have a safe deposit box where I keep offsite backup in addition to having things in the cloud, in addition to backing things up physically, so think about that. So
No, I haven't read John's book, but there's a wonderful book on risk mitigation called Waltzing with Bears.
I like that. Waltzing with bears.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll have to include that in the resources, Richard. Um, so I have a question for you guys. All right. Time to take your pen and paper back out. What do you think is your biggest challenge with starting your business or with growing your business? And what risk management do you need to do? So the first question is, what is your biggest challenge? What's the hardest thing for you? For me right now, it's cash flow, honestly. That is a perennial issue for me because I'm a single person consulting, right? Um, what is yours? Might be something totally different.
Well, it's kind of the same if you say managing the amount of work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's just let everybody jot that down for a minute. And then the second question is, what risk management do you have in place or that you need to have in place after you heard some of the things that I said? What is the risk management you need to have in place? Risk management and challenge. Okay, it looks like everybody's pretty much ready. So I'm only giving you a few minutes to do this because I don't want you to overthink, but you can always go back and revisit these after we're done today. So we talked about cash flow, client payment, vendor payment, being able to pay your vendors. The other thing to think about with financials is taxes. When you're working on a 1099 basis as a contractor, they're not taking out Social Security, Medicare, income tax. You have to put that money aside so that you can pay it at the end of the year. So I recommend putting aside at least a third of whatever revenue you bring in a separate account that you don't touch so that you have enough money to pay your taxes every quarter. And that's the other thing. You have to pay quarterly taxes when you're self-employed, right? Project management. You have multiple, you're the IT, you're the chief cook and bottle washer, right? You're juggling multiple priorities. You have IT, you might have IT issues. What's your risk management for that? You might have slipping schedules. You had it very nicely staggered so that client A finishes a month before client B starts, and then client A had slippage, and now you're doing essentially two full-time jobs at the same time, right? Bad clients, people who just behave badly, I usually do if somebody's behaving badly I fire them. Do not be afraid of firing your clients if they're not nice people. Life is too short. Don't worry about your reputation, right? Paperwork. There's a lot more paperwork and administrivia associated with being your own boss and knowing when to say no for what projects. So really think about, and one of the ways that you avoid the bad client, and I have to say that I have been really, really lucky. I've only in 23 years of business or 22 years of business, I have only had 2 clients who were just like, nope, never working for you again, right? The rest of them have been awesome and good people. And part of that is because I have a very clear picture in my head of who my ideal client is, and I have a no assholes rule, right? And if a client is a pain in the butt, I jack up my prices the next time I work with them, right? Because if they're still willing to pay me after they're, if they're willing to pay me more after they were hard, difficult to work with, sure, I'll, whatever. Sometimes it's not worth it even then, right? But who is your ideal client? So think about that one. Jot it down. Jot it down. Just like five characteristics of your ideal client. Okay. And I'm going fast because I know we're kind of running short on time. So I think that with your ideal client, here's an exercise if you choose to accept it. Pause, take some time, put some music on where you won't be interrupted. Make a list of all the things you want in a client. Just everything. Don't filter it. Don't stress about it. Don't overthink it. Just whatever comes to your mind. Set the list aside for 24 hours. Come back to the list, cross off anything that does not really resonate here. Because what happens sometimes is that your brain says, oh, well, I should put this on when it really isn't something that's that important to you. So the second time you review it, cross off anything that doesn't resonate, add anything you've thought of since then, set it aside one more time. Come back to it the next day, and then rewrite the list neatly and legibly, put it next to your bed. Read that every day for 30 days. Because what that is doing, because the universe, what you focus on becomes stronger. So, and you want to focus on what you do want, not on what you don't want. So everything on that list needs to be worded in a positive. So if you don't want, if you have a no assholes rule, say instead, I want to work for people who have integrity, honesty, are genuinely good people, right? Whatever that means for you, right? Read that list for 30 days, and then what that does is it sets your brain looking for those opportunities. It's really a great way to do that. The other thing that you need to think about when you're starting your own business is, do you want to have employees who are W-2 or 1099? Do you want to hire and fire people? Do you want to do what kind of training, harassment, what harassment training, managing clients, what are the personnel things that you want to deal with as a self-employed person? Like, contact services has 10, 15 people, Sarah O'Keefe has 10 people, 10 or 15 people. Do you want that many? Do you want employees, or do you want to work for a contracting agency as their employee, but you are a contractor? Because that's also an option, right? You're still a small business owner, right? You still have to have that mindset, but that gives you more steady paycheck and things like that. And you may shift back and forth. When I worked on federal contracts, I worked through somebody else as a W-2 because I don't want to deal with the paperwork for becoming an approved federal contractor, right? So those are some things to think about.
Mhm.
And we already talked about a lot of this other stuff. So how do you think through these things? Use your team, use your lawyer, your accountant, tap into their knowledge, ask questions, plan. The other thing is make sure that you're blocking out time in your schedule for personal stuff, because it's really easy, especially when you're first getting started, to just like take over all that time, all of your, just take over your entire life with working. And then that's not good. That leads to burnout. You've gotta make time for yourself and sharpen the saw, as Stephen Covey says. And the other thing that's really critical is being able to say no and being able to put work aside. So for example, I tend to take off at least 2 weeks at the end of December, and I take off at least a couple of weeks in July or August, and I take off a couple of weeks, a week or two in the spring. So at least once a quarter, I try to take a few days off. As a entrepreneur, you should be taking like one day at the end of the quarter to do quarterly planning and do an evaluation of where you are against your goals or against your OKRs, your KPIs, whatever you want to call them. And when you go on vacation, leave your work behind. Do vacations that allow you to turn off your cell phone, right?
One comment about OKRs, by the way, you don't look at them once a quarter, you look at them all the time.
Well, yeah, that's true. But then you do that evaluation and revision, once a quarter, but or quarterly, at least quarterly. So yeah, so make sure that you're doing that. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, we've kind of covered a lot of stuff, and you guys are all pretty experienced. I put some just small business resources in here. NABO is, it's just nabo.org. NABO is the National Association of Women Business Owners. SCORE is a volunteer organization of mentors for small business owners. Publications, books. The other thing is that I'm doing a class on conscious leadership that starts on the 3rd of February. And I'm giving STC members $200 off. So the coupon code's there. You can use the QR code to register. And I hope that, this is starting the 3rd of February. It's 2 hours a week. It's neuroscience and mindfulness-based approach. And just to leadership, and takes a broad-based view of leadership. So this is something that I've been working on for a while, and it's pretty amazing. It's appreciative inquiry based and there's design thinking and appreciative inquiry in this, and I think you'll like it. So I did a workshop at LavaCon that was very well received. So anyway, thank you so much for your time tonight. I appreciate you, and anyone viewing online, if it's after the 3rd of February and you're curious about this, I'd be happy to connect with you. So go ahead and send me an email.
Okay, you mentioned books, by the way. I just thought I'd mention this one.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah. Is that on your
It's
resource?
not on my list, no, but it should be.
That's the Nolo Press. Yeah, they're a local press here. I don't know if they're still in business, but they were in business for a long time.
Yeah, we should look and see. You should look and see online and then maybe add that to the resources.
Yeah,
Richard, what's the name of that book again?
it's called Working for Yourself: Law and Taxes for independent contractors, freelancers, and gig workers of all types.
Okay.
And the
Yeah.
thing about Nolo Press books is that they tend to update them every year because the law keeps changing. And
Yeah.
Nolo focused on the legal aspects of things.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Richard.
Mhm.
So does anybody else have any questions or comments? Because like I said, some of you, John, you've been in business longer than I have. Patrick, same. Lina, same. You know. Any of you have any questions?
And I have a question about growing a business. What you mentioned that you didn't want to be managing others and necessarily deal with HR and so forth. Have you managed to stay true to that?
Well, I
Let's
didn't.
not grow, let's keep it small. And
When I started, I wanted what is known as a lifestyle business, right? I wanted to be able to work the projects that I wanted to do, and I didn't want to have to feed employees. However, some of my contracts have involved me managing teams and managing projects for big content management implementations. So I get the advantage of having a team without the disadvantage of having to go out and feed them, right? So when I was working for other people, when I'm working for other people, I love having a team. I love leading a team, but when I'm working for myself, um, I do work with subcontractors a lot, especially for like graphics or like data architecture, that kind of stuff that I'm not that good at, or I don't want to be good at. Again, thinking about what is your superpower? What are you good at? What do you like to do? And then hire out the rest of it. And you want people on your team who are different from you, right?
oh, definitely keep it diverse. I've just run into early in my recruiting career, I got the tiger by the tail scenario of this was the mid 90s, and documentation was kind of a new awareness for a lot of companies. And I truly was working 16 and 18-hour days, 7 days a week. And the temptation to hire a clone of myself and train them was very strong. I resisted it, but I did hire. And ultimately, I had to shut that down right after the 2001, 2002 internet train wreck. But it was quite a ride. I wouldn't do it again. But it was. I'm glad I yielded to that temptation, and glad I learned.
Yeah, okay, so I'm going to say this because working 16 to 18 hours a day is not sustainable and not good for you, right?
It's true.
So if you are working more than 10 hours a day or more than 5 days a week, 6 days a week and crunch times, then you need to hire somebody
Mhm.
or change the way that you're doing your projects. So like I am in the process of onboarding a VA to offload some of the administrivia that I just don't want to do anymore. Right? Um, and so, there's a growing pains time as you're bringing somebody new on board because they're not going to do it the way you do it. But it's super important to figure out a way to do that if you want to grow, because your business is limited. If you're a single consultant, your business is limited by your capacity, your personal capacity. So if you want to grow a business that's more than, $150,000, $200,000 business, you need to be able to hire people, right? And money isn't maybe the primary motivating factor for a lot of people, but if you want to grow, and scalability, you've got to scale your systems, right? As you grow, because the stuff that's in your head, once you hire somebody, can't be in your head anymore. You've got to document those processes, right? And it's a good idea. We all know it's a good idea to make checklists for yourself anyway, so that you figured out how to do something and you're not going to have to do it again for 2 years. You probably want to write it down, take a minute to write down a checklist so that you can just go back to that checklist and run through it rather than trying to figure it out all over again, right? Because you need to be efficient with you need to be efficient to be effective.
If nobody has any more questions that they really want to be on the recording, I'm going to stop the recording and then we can keep talking as long as you want. So does anyone have anything that they really, really want on the recording? All right, hearing none of that, I'm going to stop the recording.
All right, thank